Hi there, and welcome to our last video in our Northern Ireland series. This video is going to look at the Good Friday Agreement of 1998. So the Good Friday Agreement, or Belfast Agreement as it's sometimes known as, was signed on the 10th of April 1998. And this agreement actually was the culmination of years of really hard work and negotiation, which helped to draw the Troubles, the 30-year conflict in Northern Ireland, to an end. So what factors led to the Good Friday Agreement? Well, the first factor was the election in May 1997 of Tony Blair and his Labour Party. Tony Blair had a huge majority, big landslide win, and one of his first priorities was actually the Northern Ireland peace process, which was quite significant because um, Northern Ireland wasn't a big vote-winning issue in Britain. However, he put his dedication into this, and it's led to the Good Friday Agreement. So he gets to power in May 1997. That's followed in July 1997 by another IRA ceasefire. And this renewed ceasefire allows the chance for Sinn Féin to get involved in political talks. This here angered many hardline unionist parties like the DUP, who felt a lot more had to be done before this step was even contemplated. So what was in the Good Friday Agreement? Well, there's three strands to this agreement. The first strand was about Northern Ireland itself. Northern Ireland needed a power sharing assembly, an agreed form of government to move ahead. And each of these strands has an institution. In this case, it's the Northern Ireland Assembly at Stormont, that building you can see on the right-hand side. So the aim here is to get an agreed form of power sharing within Northern Ireland. What was agreed then? Well, they did agree this, and they agreed that there was going to be a power sharing assembly at Stormont, just outside Belfast. There was going to be 108 MLAs elected by a PR voting system, that is 6 MLAs per constituency. There's 18 constituencies in Northern Ireland. This would actually give a lot of fair representation within Northern Ireland itself. There was also going to be a first and deputy first minister, and these would be chosen by the leaders of the largest unionist and the largest nationalist parties. The second strand then was a north-south strand. So in this case, it's going to set up what's known as the North-South Ministerial Council, NSMC, and you can get marks for either of those, NSMC or North-South Ministerial Council, if it comes up. So the aim here is to have an agreed rule for the Republic of Ireland and to encourage cross-border cooperation between North and South. So the NSMC was set up, and this would actually deal with issues between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, such as transport, health, tourism, and the likes of the motorway between Dublin and Belfast is a clear example of that. The third strand was put in for unionist concerns, and this is an east-west strand, and they created the British Irish Council, BIC, the British Irish Council, and this was also set up to encourage cooperation between governments across the British Isles to deal with issues of common concerns. The big issues, though, were the things that are not in the three strands. So prisoner releases, highly controversial. So paramilitary prisoners were to be released as part of this agreement. This was very controversial at the time. They are to be released on license, which means if they commit any crime at all, once they're released, they will have to go back and serve their full sentences, which could be substantial. You also have decommissioning, so this idea that paramilitary weapons were to be put beyond use. So this is like part of the tentative part of the agreement as well too. And then you've got policing reform. So an independent commission was meant to be set up. It's called the Patton Commission, and that would go on to change many things about policing. So the Royal Ulster Constabulary, the RUC, was to be changed to the PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland. Other changes included the badge, and recruitment for the police force was to be much more 50-50. And then in the Republic of Ireland, they agreed to review Articles 2 and 3 of the Irish Constitution. These articles claimed ownership of the whole island of Ireland, and these had always been a particular gnawing concern to unionists since partition. So a referendum promised to try to look at this here and aim to remove those articles. So what are the reactions to the Good Friday Agreement? Well, there are a number of reactions. First of all, nationalists. Well, nationalists are very, very, very happy with the agreement. The SDLP, John Hume, the leader, over the moon about what was achieved, because John Hume has worked really hard to put this agreement together. He's almost an architect of the agreement itself. Don't forget the SDLP was by far the largest nationalist party in Northern Ireland at this time, so their agreement was hugely important. Sinn Féin and the IRA, well, Sinn Féin supported the agreement, and its party, at its party conference, its Ardèche, they voted to allow Sinn Féin members to take their seats in the new assembly. Just remember, it's still a Northern Ireland assembly, or assembly in the north of Ireland, if you want to call it that. And that was a big move as well too for Sinn Féin to move towards. Provisional IRA, however, well, they were much more lukewarm in their support. They suggested the agreement fell short of what they were looking for, and they did not agree to decommission weapons, and that was a big issue for Unionists moving forward. What about Unionist symbol? Unionists deeply divided, very much like Sunningdale way back in the 1970s. David Trimble, the leader of the largest Unionist party, don't forget this, that the UUP is the largest Unionist party by far at this time. So David Trimble, the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, fought really hard to keep his party united behind the agreement. A lot of things that had to be agreed seemed to have an impact on the Unionist community, and he fought very hard to make sure everybody was supporting the agreement as much as possible. The agreement, though, was particularly hard for the UUP. The controversial elements really divided his party. 6 out of the UUP's 10 members of parliament would not even support it, and some big names in the party, such as Arlene Foster and one of their chief negotiators, Geoffrey Donaldson, would leave the UUP to move to the DUP, where they would actually go on to lead the parties at some stages later on. Critics of Trimble, well, they call Trimble a Lundy, a traitor, and they regard his deal as a sellout for Ulster Unionists. What about anti-agreement Unionists? Well, there's intense opposition from a number of Unionist groups. You've got Ian Paisley in the DUP, they believe it's a step towards United Ireland. You have other smaller groups like the UK Unionist Party. They all oppose the agreement, including obviously some key members of the Ulster Unionist Party as well. So they're opposed to things like dealing with Sinn Féin without the IRA putting their weapons beyond use. They're opposed to things like prisoner releases, and they're opposed to police reforms. They regard that as unjust. It's almost like not taking into account what the RUC had suffered during the Troubles. As part of the agreement, actually, the RUC were awarded the George Cross. It's the highest civilian medal as an organisation for their work during the Troubles. Together, this group actually formed an anti-agreement unionist opposition to the agreement, and they would actually go to oppose the agreement in the referendum that follows. So what about the referendums? What is a referendum? First of all, a referendum is basically a vote on a particular issue. In this case, it's a vote on whether to accept or reject this Good Friday Agreement. So everybody in Northern Ireland got sent a copy of the agreement to read through, to make their mind up. And the referendum was set for May 1998. And this would be held on both sides of the border. So the Republic of Ireland would also vote on Articles 2 and 3 at the time being removed, as well as on the agreement itself. The anti-agreement Unionists, well, they formed their own group called the United Unionist Campaign, and they were determined to oppose the agreement. Their slogan was, "It's right to say no." Most parties, however, including the SDLP, Alliance Party, Sinn Féin, most of the Ulster Unionist Party, Northern Ireland Women's Coalition, and lots of other smaller parties, including loyalist parties, campaigned to support the agreement. What were the results then? Well, the results were very clear. 71% of people in Northern Ireland voted for the agreement. In the Republic of Ireland, there was a bigger majority. 94% of people in the Republic voted for the agreement as well. And they also voted in favour of removing Articles 2 and 3 of the Constitution. However, if you break the results down a little bit, you can see big differences and perhaps an air of warning about what's going to come ahead in the future, because 97% of nationalists supported the agreement. But for Unionists, it was 52%, and Unionists are going to struggle to try to push this further ahead. However, they do push ahead collectively as pro-agreement parties. The first assembly is set up in Stormont. The majority of parties chosen at that election are pro-agreement parties. The first minister was the UUP leader, David Trimble, and the deputy first minister was Seamus Mallon from the SDLP. However, the Assembly still had opposition. The DUP were in the Assembly, and they were supported by other anti-agreement unionists, including some UUP MLAs, and they are still determined to oppose the agreement. Some believe they're determined to bring the House down from within. So the DUP refused to work with Sinn Féin ministers or attend NSMC North-South Ministerial Council meetings, making this first Assembly particularly hard to move ahead. However, the agreement would face many challenges over the next few years, but it would also create a much better, lasting peace and better future for Northern Ireland itself. Many